smashing things and overturning tables.
I did bring in a new graphics card, by the way.
You did, yeah.
Another one to the display back here.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we need a visual representation though of your moves.
Oh, that's the broken 580.
Yeah, I was actually thinking, do you want to cook that in the oven and see if it fixes it?
No.
What have we got to lose, right?
There is an oven here. You could do it.
Yeah.
Serve it up a little bit.
I
think it's a
Why
great
would we
idea.
You never heard that? The cooking
I've
of
heard
computer
a lot
components.
of things about how to fix computer components.
Yeah, and that's one of the ones I've heard. I don't think it works, but we could find
I've
out.
also heard about sticking things in freezers. It's always
That could be a good episode, though.
Yeah.
Of what does work and what doesn't work. Turns out none of them work.
Does it bake?
It does not bake.
We just stick electronics into the oven
And see what
and then see what happens
Just
after.
get a camera in there. Oh, man. Yeah. Speed it up a bit. Watch it all melt. Yeah, I think that would work really well. All right. We're live right now. Hello, everyone. This is Close to the Metal. This is our weekly computing podcast where we go in-depth with specific topics on computing. And today, we are talking about Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference. And then in particular, we're talking about macOS and iMacs and what they announced when it comes to actual computers. We've got a question up right now. We're live on Facebook and YouTube. The question is, would you pay $5,000 for the new iMac Pro? We're going to kind of go through the specs on that and what is all entailed with the iMac Pro and talk about macOS. These two guys have a lot of opinions on that. I'm Greg Nibbler. Let's introduce our cast here. To my right,
Brad Burke.
Brad Burke.
Matt Smith.
And Matt Smith. All right. Why don't we, while we're getting some answers on that poll, just to see what people think, if they're willing to pay the $5,000 for that, let's cover a couple of other polls that we had. We had one that went up yesterday on Digital Trends Twitter account and Facebook page asking, what about the new Apple iMacs has you most excited? And 76% or 46% said the 7th gen Intel processors were what they were most excited about. That was the Intel processors was the most exciting part of the new iMac announcement. Discrete graphics were second, improved displays, and then Thunderbolt 3 was 13%. Brad.
That's really saying something because new processors that have already been out for like 6 months is like about the most boring thing I can think of for a computer update. And that's what people are really getting. I mean, it's true. Like the other stuff was like, hey, the screen's like brighter now. I was like, yeah, the screen was pretty bright before. I wasn't ever cranking it to maximum brightness. It's not like a huge deal. And like Thunderbolt 3, everyone kind of saw that coming. And that's actually, I think you're probably more likely to use Thunderbolt 3 on a high-end iMac than you are on a MacBook Pro.
Well, only 13% of respondents agree with you.
But yeah,
and 14% on Facebook. It's pretty much exactly the same on both of them. Yeah, the 7th gen Intel processors was the most exciting thing.
7th gen Intel processors.
For the iMac.
You get like an extra 10% performance and better 4K video playback at more efficient power. So
yeah, which is, a feature that Apple took credit for.
Yeah.
Their keynote.
Yeah, that seemed to be kind of a theme of the keynote yesterday was like, oh, other people did things and now Apple is also doing them.
No, we do that too.
Like they did the boomerang thing too where they were like, look, you can take a video and it loops back and forth. I'm like, oh yeah, like boomerang, right? Like, what's that? I don't know what that is. I've never heard of it. Boomer who?
Yeah, that does kind of seem to be the trend with a lot of what Apple's announcing. So, and we're not going to talk about the other announcements. We're going to stick like mostly to the computing side for this, but so the polls, Intel 7th gen processor. That's what people are most excited about for the iMac. Woo! And we're going to get into this to the iMac Pro as well. We're going to talk about that, and I'm seeing most of the answers coming through on Facebook and YouTube are no. No, there is a hell no. There is a no way. There is no I wouldn't. Nope.
No, I would not.
No way.
Would not, sir.
No way. Apple should make affordable Macs, not the other way around. Let's see. Hell no. Typical Apple overpriced product. So a lot of no's. I don't think I see one yes has come through yet so far on whether and a nobody. So a nobody was also in there.
Okay.
So
be creative with it.
Yes. So most people are saying no, and we're going to kind of go through the details on the iMac Pro. But before we do that, let's just talk about what was announced in general for Mac OS, for the Mac OS side of it.
Is this Mac OS?
Mac OS.
So they have a new file system. They have a new file system. Your mail will take up the 35% less space than it used to, and important messages in mail will appear at the top sometimes.
Okay.
And photos will sync with your other devices better.
Okay.
And there's a new background image. And I'm not like actually being like like I'm not making this up. Like this is I'm pretty much going down the list of things they said. Like there's one thing I'm missing. What am I missing, Brad? Do you remember?
It was.
There was one other program that had something new, and it was pretty minor, but
So not a whole lot overall is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
For macOS.
No,
Not a whole
actually,
lot of
I wasn't
improvements.
watching that part because I got bored of that and started cleaning the lab because it was more exciting.
They're really hiding their opinions here today, so you're gonna have to really try to read between the lines on how they feel about the Apple announcements. So yeah, Matt, you've got an op-ed that's up right now on digitaltrends.com talking about some of the announcements from this from the keynote, in particular with macOS and iOS and everything along those lines. And I kind of want to just hit on what was for macOS. I guess not a whole lot. And
I mean, so one of the things that we might be sort of glossing over that could be seen as a big deal is the VR support.
okay,
So they came on stage and they said like macOS is going to support Vive.
right.
So you can now plug in your HTC Vive and do whatever programs work on macOS. I'm not sure what exactly all will, but
Hey, there's Steam
they
for Mac.
they pointed out Final Cut Pro X, Steam VR, Epic Unreal 4 Editor, Unity Editor. So basically very developer focused.
Okay.
And that was cool. They had like a cool demo with Darth Vader showing up, and it was like they were mocking up a scene in real time for a Star Wars movie. It was Industrial Light and Magic. They
actually
came
brought
out
them
and-
in.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And I mean that was cool. Like, but A, it's something that most Macs can't actually handle because they're not fast enough. And B, I don't know, like VR has been around for a while now. So it's like one of those things where like there's still enough people that haven't heard about VR that I feel like when demos come out for it, there's still a good amount of people that are going to see it and go, "Wow, that's cool, VR."
Yeah.
But it's
not that
It's
new
been
either.
around,
Yeah, it's been
and-
around. And if
and
it's something that
so-
you're interested in, you already know about it anyway.
so for them to be like, "Oh, you can do VR stuff now," and it's like, well, yeah, I mean, that's cool, but
it's kind of
it's
one of
kind
those
of
things where
expected.
you should have VR capability or
like
something with
it's
VR
good that they
capability.
have it, but it's not like whoa,
Mm-hmm.
look what they can do or anything like that.
And for the price you're paying, I mean, you're looking at like $1,300 to $1,500 for the Core i5 4K iMac.
Mm-hmm.
And for $1,300 to $1,500, you can also put together a very high-end desktop with a 4K screen. That's totally not unreasonable.
On Facebook right here, Xander just said, price for price, you could beat the specs building out a custom computer.
Yeah, and you've always, I mean, that's the thing with Apple. You've always been able to do that. That's not why you're buying an Apple. I still think that their biggest draw, even as they start to try and roll out these features and make them seem like a big deal, is their close integration of hardware and software and iOS and macOS.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone I talk to who uses a Mac, that's the thing for them, is they have an iPhone, they have an iPad, and they have a macOS desktop or a MacBook, and everything works together very seamlessly. And that's that's something you don't really get on the Windows side, even if you're using Android or Windows Phone and Windows, there's no really close. You can't send a text message from both places and have Siri and all your stuff synced up perfectly. You sort of have to work for that. But that's not the kind of crowd that these computers are really appealing to.
Yeah.
They're trying to say like, oh, look at this power, we're giving pro graphics cards, and my thing is sort of like that's not who's buying iMacs. And I think that's a problem too, that there's sort of this not a clarity of vision for this computer line. And I think we saw that too with these, like the MacBook Pros. People use those MacBook Pros for, they used to use them for creative things, for photo editing, video editing, music stuff on the go, and it was really nice. And then you start taking away their ports and you start cutting their battery life, and now things aren't really as appealing anymore. And it's just sort of, Apple's just making changes, and it doesn't seem like they know why.
Yeah, just as it changes just to make changes. I mean, do you feel like it's that just to keep on?
Well, I mean, I think that to use virtual as an example, it's something that they kind of had to do at some point. So, in the same way that adding 7th gen processors that we're kind of making fun of, but they had to do that at some point. So it's good they did it, but it's not something that is really exciting. I also sort of with the VR thing, I'm really skeptical still of how it's going to actually be used. Because sure, I don't know, maybe I haven't been to Industrial Light and Magic. maybe they all use Macs and refuse to use anything else. That might be the case. Haven't been there. And for them, sure. If that's true, I bet that's awesome. But I have a really hard time believing there's a lot of game developers and VR developers out there who are just like, I'm going to develop on Mac. That is going to be my development platform for VR. It's like, why would there be? Like, they haven't supported it in the past, so Rift still doesn't support it. They came out they made a short statement basically saying we have no plans to support macOS at this time.
Right.
So I just it's like I'm just not really seeing that this is going to see a lot of widespread use. And as far as VR games go, I mean, yeah, Steam VR might support macOS now, but that doesn't mean all the games are just going to work.
Right.
Because they're all coded in like DirectX 11 or 12 or whatever.
Yeah, and why do all that work?
And they need to be coded over the OpenGL or I guess Metal.
Yeah, and are there enough people to even make that worthwhile to recode it? I mean,
you could always boot camp it too. I mean, theoretically, I think that would probably work.
Well, yeah, but then you would have the support anyway.
Right.
Like,
well, yeah, because they added HDMI out was basically seems like what they did on this case, right? In order to
I'm not sure about the port thing, but I'm just like referring to like the Mac OS actual operating system support. So.
Okay.
They might not have had HDMI.
Right, but I was saying at a hardware level, it's pretty trivial. So yeah, you would support it on PC either way.
Okay, and taking a look here on Facebook and YouTube again to the question, we're still getting a lot of no's coming through. I don't think I've seen one yes yet.
Have you asked any new questions, or is this?
No, it's just everybody's quite.
Everyone's just very like no,
very much.
I don't know. No, sir. No to what you're saying.
It's a lot of no's. Yeah, no's to everything. Somebody asked, are your commenters gamer, coders, or designers? I mean, I don't know. I'm sure we do have a portion of the audience that's watching that does do that. I don't know if they have any thoughts on that, whether the iMac Pro is something they would want to code on. We also have, some other comments coming through. So I'm going to go, we do have one yes. I take that back. Okay, so we have Ross. I'm acknowledging in all caps. He just said, I said yes. So acknowledged. And why don't we talk about the iMac Pro then? Let's get into it a little bit and talk about what it has, what comes with it. The price tag right off the bat is $5,000 for, I'm assuming, the base level.
Yeah.
And then you can upgrade from there.
Right.
5K display. So it is going to have that 5K display. It uses an AMD Vega GPU, so it has that. It's got Intel's 18-core processor, and I'm assuming are these the base level?
That's not the base.
No. That's not the base level. So
the base level is an 8-core.
Oh, that's a big difference. Okay.
Yeah, only 10 less.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah, I'm actually. Trying to bring up here the exact specs, but the base $5,000 level one, you're still going to get the 5K screen, but that's on all the 27-inch iMacs at this point, so not too surprising there. And you're going to get 8-core Xeon processor and the other specs. I mean,
and some other things that will come. Well, I know it's got SSD storage options up to 2 terabytes. Again, that's not going to be the base level.
Pretty standard for the iMacs as well.
Yeah,
you're really paying for you're paying for these Intel Xeon processors, which are server class, business class, workstation class processors. Whether you need those or not, I mean, I think the big deal there is maybe, I don't know, you get like better multi-core workloads. I don't know what you're doing on a iMac Pro, an iMac that's requiring that.
The Xeon so the Xeon processor, I mean, like that's always been a workstation thing, and it's kind of Intel sort of certifies it for a very high level of reliability. Another thing about the reliability is you can get error correcting RAM.
Theoretically, it has to be.
What was that?
It has to be, I think.
It's always on it.
I think you have to have error correcting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So up to 128 gigabytes.
Yep.
Up to 4 terabytes of SSD storage. And again, this is not the base level. This is the high level.
This
thing.
is after $5,000. This is where you can upgrade to.
Yeah. And another little interesting tidbit's 10 gigabit Ethernet, which is kind of cool.
Okay.
So it's really tricked out. On the base $5,000 level one, you're going to get the 8-core processor. You're still going to get Vega. You're going to get 32 gigabytes of RAM. You're going to get 1 terabytes of SSD storage. Also Thunderbolt 3 and the 10 gigabit Ethernet. Which, I mean, like, that's not I mean, I'm not gonna say like the iMac Pro at $5,000 with that kind of hardware is like, I don't know, like I don't think it's like absurdly overpriced.
Okay.
But
Comparatively, like compared if you went with a Windows one with some of the same stuff, would it be?
well, if you wanted the ones with the same stuff, it would probably be less expensive.
Yeah.
But not by a great deal.
Okay.
I mean, I think that the one thing that the iMac Pro will have going with it for it, which has also been true of the iMacs, the 27-inch iMacs, is that 5K display, because that right there is an expensive display, and the fact that it's bundled into it actually does kind of sweeten the deal a lot.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be paying probably, well, I mean, the LG one was like $1,300.
Yeah.
And Dell has one that's like $1,500. So you can sort of figure that if you were not buying the iMac Pro and you wanted that 5K display, whatever PC you build, you're going to add that $1,300 onto the price.
But to be fair, a $3,500 PC is a pretty freaking sweet PC.
Do you think it's better than what this?
Yeah, but
offer?
I mean,
it depends what you're doing with it. But
Right.
but I do think that like, I mean, you can spend if you spend $3,500 on a PC, you might not get some of these features. You might not get 10 gigabit Ethernet. I don't know what the status of that is over PCIe. I imagine there are add-in cards that do that. I'm not sure what the pricing is like on Xeon chips, but I know you can get the
Xeon chips are
Ryzen or the Skylake X chips. There are or Skylake E or whatever that there are high-end options as well that'll get you a comparable PC for under $3,500. So it's not out of the ordinary, but it's also, like you said, it's not a crazy bump in price like you might find in other, like I feel like there are in other places in the Mac line where, like, if you're looking at a MacBook Pro, you're spending $500+ more than you'd spend on a comparable laptop from a Windows maker, as opposed to this is like, it is more competitive in that way. But it kind of has to be, because at $5,000 you're already way more than most people are going to spend on a computer.
Right. It's not. That's a very niche audience that's going to be using this.
And when you're reaching out to a niche audience like that, they know what they're looking at and they know what they're looking for. And I don't know that the Mac Pro was ever a huge seller, because you could do the same thing on the Mac Pro. It started at a few grand, and you could pump like $30,000 into that thing by throwing all kinds of drives and crap at it. So.
But you can't upgrade it later on,
right?
And that's I think for this level of user, I would think that's a huge advantage. Is you're plugging that much money in, you're investing, but then you can upgrade gradually rather than have to go for a whole new machine.
Yeah. And if you do spend a couple grand on a Xeon processor for a desktop machine that you can upgrade, that processor is going to last you a long, long time. And you can replace the GPUs in it, whenever, and you can replace better drives or whatever. But that chip is going to last you years and years and years. So, it's a long-term investment.
Also, the iMac Pro is space gray.
It is space gray. That is like the coolest thing.
We didn't highlight that. I should have put
Apple
that
will
in.
not sell the accessories independently. So if you want space gray and space gray keyboard and space gray mouse,
you
better get your checkbook out.
Really? You have to buy it all in one?
I bet you there's going to be a market for people who are using like other peripherals with it and sell the bundle of their, trackpad, keyboard, and mouse.
Yeah, probably.
Like $1,200.
Probably, yeah, because a lot of people probably don't even want to use it.
Yeah.
I probably would get a different keyboard and mouse. So
Yeah. All right, so again, kind of running through what we have with the iMac Pro, what was announced with it, what the benefits are. The $5,000 price seems to be a big barrier for a lot of people. And again, this could be like, for somebody like me, this isn't something that I would need anyway. Of course I would take one, but it's not something that I would even utilize that much that they've got going on. I mean, who do you think would fully utilize this?
I mean, probably the industrial
light
magic
magic,
people,
but maybe.
Yeah, I know that's the thing. I said, I haven't been there. I don't know if they actually use Macs Pros and refuse to use Windows systems or not.
Ross, who's on Facebook commenting, seems to be very adamant that he's a fan of this. Ross, I'm curious what you do, what you would use this for. What would you use this iMac Pro for? Because maybe there probably is a profession that this works for. I'm just saying it's I think it's going to be a really small market.
I'm thinking if you maybe have like a startup that's doing a lot of like media work, and you have just like so much money that you just don't care, and you want your whole office to look like really slick and have everybody using iMac Pros, and you want the like gunmetal everywhere, the space gray or whatever, that it seems like they really want it to be a status thing, like a lot of Apple products are.
And that's an interesting thing that has sort of become a recurring trend with Apple Pro products, is that they have started to look less and less like actual Pro products and more like sort of borderline status products.
Yep.
Where you get like an iMac Pro, and it's like, yeah, that is definitely a capable workstation. But there's things about it, like the difficulty of upgrading it, and how it's all bundled together with the display, that also kind of make you scratch your head and think that in a lot of scenarios for a workstation enterprise environment, it's not going to be a good choice. Mm-hmm. So then it's like, well, who is it really for? And you start to think, well, it's for people who have a lot of money and just want a really fast computer. And are they actually using it to their greatest extent? Some people probably are, but some people probably aren't.
Yeah.
Some people, are probably
maybe just getting it.
They just want the fast Mac because they,
because it's a Mac.
That's what it is.
Just because.
And it's the same thing with the MacBook. The MacBook Pro 15 at this point is, it doesn't really work for a lot of people as a workstation because the keyboard's not super. The port selection is very, it's not really that fast in terms of GPU. It
Right.
definitely puts more of a priority on being thin and light. So,
Yeah, but if somebody's buying it for that, ultimately just because it's a Mac, or that's a portion of why they're buying it, that thin part, that could be a very big
yeah, for them
piece,
it is. But it's like the Pro thing is not actually a Pro.
Right.
And I don't think Apple's the only one doing this. I think if you look at some other segments, there's probably...
the Pro word's getting watered down.
Yeah, that's sort of been something going on for a while where Pro... Like the PlayStation 4 Pro.
Yeah.
Obviously the PlayStation 4 Pro is not actually for professional gamers. But there's sort of that mystique about the Pro
I'm a
name.
pro, yeah.
Where it's like, it's more like Pro means I take this really seriously and I'm going to spend my money to prove how seriously I take it. And I feel like that's
kind of what's
sort
going
of what's
on here.
happening here.
Okay.
So,
all right. So yeah, talking about the iMac Pro and whether people would buy it, Ross said he uses it for 3D architecture, 3D creation. So that was what somebody, and again, he's been kind of the main person who's been pro iMac Pro.
Just throwing this out there, the Surface Studio has a beautiful screen, and you can use the pen and the dial for that. And I feel like for architecture and things like that, that is a pretty perfect setup.
Yeah.
Sort of like what the Surface Studio. It's not as fast, but it is sort of what the Surface Studio is built for.
Kind of goes along those lines. Yeah.
Yeah,
of somebody who would
to be an easel. It's built to be, a big work surface.
Yeah.
Rather than wow, I didn't play right into that.
Well,
I was in trouble like 3 words into that sentence.
I'm just going to let you bail yourself out. All right. Well, let's talk about this in general. And again, with the WWDC announcements, the developers conference announcements, we're not going to go into the other sides of the other things that they've been bringing up. We're sticking mainly with the computing side. For macOS in general, for fans of macOS, where is Apple going with this? And this kind of goes back to your op-ed, Matt, kind of about this. Like, where are they heading? What's the future?
iPad.
Is that
All
it?
iPad everything.
It's all going to iOS.
Yeah.
It's
actually funny. I thought the most telling thing was not what they did with Mac, but what they did with iPad Pro this time around, because they came out with iPad Pro and they're like, "Hey, iPad Pro, you're gonna have, or just iPad in general, I guess. You got a file system. You've got a file system now. Yes." So that that is a big step in actually making iOS full-fledged operating system.
Yeah.
And because now finally, for the first time ever, you can go in and organize the data that is on your iPad, and just like you would on a desktop computer. When the next version of iOS actually goes live. Mm-hmm. Plus, they also, came out and said, we're going to give it 120 hertz display, adapted refresh, and they also, did more demos where they're talking about, the pen and touchscreen support and all that, and all the cool stuff you can do with that. And it's just why? I don't think an iPad Pro, is something that I would want to get instead of a computer, but at this point, it's quite obvious, that's where all the cool features and all the forward-looking features are going.
Yeah.
You can't use it, you can't pick up a Mac, and just out of the box, take a pen and start doing something in Photoshop. It doesn't support that.
And
Can't
do you
do
think
it.
that's something that they're going to add, or is this?
No.
Or are they just really? Do you think they're secretly just getting away?
I mean,
from
how would
macOS
they?
altogether?
How would they? Like, everyone made
Yeah.
fun of Microsoft when they came out with Windows 8. It was like, ha ha, look at you trying to do both things at once. And then, 5 years later, they're the ones that have an operating system that actually can work both ways.
Right.
And if you try to deal with macOS right now, it would be a disaster. Because nothing about the operating system is remotely built to work with touch.
Even the Touch Bar is running watchOS. It's
Yeah.
basically like a smartwatch attached to the top of your keyboard that's hooked up to your computer.
Right.
I agree. Like, I think Apple could be in a position, because they have perfect control over their own hardware and their own software, to make something that is like a 360-degree hinge MacBook. And when you flip it around, it turns into iOS, and you've got apps, you've got, that, like, trying to blend those worlds would be an absolute mess.
To run both?
Yeah, like they're
Run
trying
iOS
to they're
and
trying to
macOS.
find a way, like you're saying, to blend like a touch and a desktop operating system would be a total mess for the operating system at first. But they are actually in a position to do it. Like, Microsoft sort of had to do the Surface to do that. Like, they had to make a computer in order to get that right and get that balance right. And Apple already makes the computer. They have perfect control. Like, they don't have to worry about releasing an operating system that works on hardware they didn't make. And they would be in a position to create something that it falls between those products. But
Do you think
this
that's part
is
of the
kind of a
future
mess
of their
right now.
focus of where they would end up taking this?
They're gonna have
or
to.
Is it going to be gradually phasing that out altogether? So where it's
I
just
think-
a more smaller and smaller
I
percentage
think
of what they do.
I mean they already like so the argument about whether or not Apple will kill Mac is kind of, in a way, it's one of those arguments that's kind of like a false argument, because Apple is probably never going to come out and say, like,
That's it.
we're going to
done.
kill it. Like,
Yeah.
they're going to, phase out of it. If they don't want to do it anymore, they're going to phase out of it and just sort of gradually be like, do less and less stuff, which is also it's already really apparent that macOS team, like, they are not getting much attention anymore.
Yeah.
They hardly do any updates the people working on that over there are obviously, like, way understaffed compared to iOS team.
Yeah,
Like, you're
it's
getting
just
way
not a
less attention.
focus as much.
Right.
I mean, you even said
And-
in the presentation, what did they get? How much time did they get out of it? About 30 minutes?
Well, it was 30 minutes for the Mac, and of that, the Mac OS thing was literally like less than 5 minutes.
Wow. Out of a
So
2.5-hour keynote speech.
So, like, you want to see a big company phasing out, like, one of its more popular product lines that doesn't make a lot of money anymore. I think that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
Like, they don't come out and say, we're going to kill it. They just stop talking about it. The same way Microsoft killed Windows Phone, for example. They didn't come out and say, someone's probably going to. But I don't think they ever came out and said that they're definitively just, like, killing it. Like, they're still working on it. Mm-hmm. They still have Windows 10 for mobile. It's still a thing.
Somebody's still employed there.
But,
working.
but like, I'm not sure if you can even go buy a phone that, like, at a major U.S. store that supports Windows Phone. You kind of have to search.
Yeah.
And they certainly aren't doing a lot of talking about it. I mean, they didn't say anything at Build, as I recall, about Windows Phone. They haven't had any Windows Phone announcements or press conferences. So, yeah, it's pretty much dead.
Yeah.
And one thing that our other staff writer, Jace, pointed out yesterday when we were watching the keynote is that Apple doesn't really have as many entry points anymore. That this is one of those things that as their computers become more expensive and the iPhones become more expensive, that it used to be the thing was, oh, you spent $200 and you get an iPod. And you listen to music on it and you say, wow, this thing works really great and the interface is really cool and I'm using iTunes now. And then it comes time to buy a smartphone and you go, oh, well, I'll spend a little more and I'll get the iPhone.
Yeah.
Because it fits
I
in with
really
the thing
like-
I'm already using. I've got my music already here and all that stuff. And then eventually you say, well, I've got this iPhone. I'm going to get the MacBook Pro. But they sort of don't have that anymore because the iPods.
Well,
I mean,
is the
they still
iPad-
To be fair,
but-
the iPad is $329.
they're getting cheaper, but I don't think that's it's still not a terribly popular product category, is it? Like, I don't think iPads are
Tablets?
tablets, like, to an extent are, but
How much is the basic iPhone? It's like
it's like 500.
$450.
I thought it was like 500 for the SE.
It's probably about 5. Yeah, I would guess.
But
about
it's still, but I
500.
mean, it's just not. It's not the same as it was. It's not the same kind of, and especially on the computing side.
You're talking about
I-
like the $100 or less entry point, or
Well, even the like the $200 or $300 entry point. I guess
Yeah.
if iPads are that cheap, that's one way to get into it. But he just pointed out that, like, computers, they aren't really hitting that $600 to $800 category anymore, where people are very actively buying computers before they get a much nicer computer. That it's just not the same sort of progression as it was. That was something
jump
that really
into the product
the
line
whole
in
thing
general.
was you get somebody involved in the ecosystem at a really low entry point so that they enjoy it.
Well, there's a lot of competition for lower entry points than getting into an Apple product.
Yeah, and that's one thing too that Apple used to do really well in schools. And now everybody buys Chromebooks in schools, and they just have not been able. They're just not even trying to catch that market anymore.
Right as you said that too, Xander on Facebook just said Chromebooks took that category.
Yeah.
Which is true. Which was very smart on Google's.
Well, and now you use a Chromebook, you use Google Docs, you use Google Drive, and you come out of school using Google Drive, and now you keep using Google Drive, and you don't see much of a reason to get a Mac. It's the same thing.
I think the long term play for Apple with computers is that they do want iOS to be your thing, and they probably want the iOS device to be your computer in all like substantial ways. So I think the missing thing for them is a way to make your iPhone or your iPad work as a big screen desktop experience. So some kind of dock, or the dream would be a wireless solution where you would literally put your iPad like on your desk, and it would just like automatically show up on a screen with you have a keyboard and a mouse. If you could do that,
Some kind of Chromecast type thing. Yeah.
and if Apple figures out how to do that,
right,
then bye Mac. They're going to.
There's no need anymore. Yeah.
And I think the missing link is I don't think the tech's there. I think it's a very complex problem, but I definitely think that's the way they're eyeing.
You think that's what they want to do? Is just eventually all iOS, have it work for
every
platform.
it's so much easier for them,
Well, it's like Apple TV is sort of the beginnings of that in a way. That you don't have to worry about a monitor. You just use your TV. Oh, now you can order stuff on your TV, using your phone.
And it fits in the vision of what Apple wants to do. Like they want to have simple, functional products, and Mac OS is not necessarily as much that. It was like really simple and functional back when your options were Mac OS and Windows or DOS or some build of Linux. At that point, like Mac OS was like so intuitive. But these days,
it's kind of been passed up.
I think their designers, probably, Johnny Ive looks at it and goes, this is way too finicky. Like,
yeah.
So
where they're going is kind of confusing, but you're saying possibly just getting rid of macOS altogether, iOS across every platform.
Yeah,
it's one possibility.
In the long term, and then, it's always these sort of prediction things. Like ultimately, I'm not a mind reader. I don't know what Tim Cook is thinking exactly. He could jump out, tomorrow and decide that they're going to make space rockets. Yeah. Crazier things that happen.
Self-driving cars or something.
Or self-driving cars or something.
Totally
they were already working on that, actually. Yeah. The Apple car.
So who knows? But I think when you look at what they're actually doing, it's like, question is, what are they actually doing? What are their actions saying right now?
Yeah.
They don't really care about Mac.
Yeah.
Because they're not updating it a lot.
Unless you want to spend a lot of money and get a really
unless you want to spend a lot of money. So, until they start putting out Macs, more regularly, they make sure the hardware is updated more regularly. Until they start, really, I think the big thing is Mac OS. Until they start updating Mac OS regularly,
this is going to be what everybody's talking about. Is that it's going to be going away because they're not. You're right. They're not giving it a whole lot of attention, even in this. There's so many different facets that they're working on, and Mac OS just does not seem to be one of the things. And again, thank you everybody for tuning in. This is Close to the Metal. This is our computing podcast. And just as we're wrapping up here, because we could probably talk about this for another hour and a half, and it seems like everybody's engaged with this too. We all loved some Apple products, but Mac OS seems to be something that's not getting focused. Whether or not the iMac Pro, you would pay $5,000 for it. Again, overwhelmingly, it is a no as far as what I've seen. People were applying. I'm sure you are out there, the people that want to get this one. And again, if it was given to me, hell yeah, I would use it. But $5,000, no, that's not in my price range. But any final thoughts just on this section of the developers conference as far as computing and iMacs?
I think for me, the real winner was the 27-inch iMac. I think having more powerful discrete graphics and Thunderbolt 3 modern connectivity, it makes that system a lot more appealing. And looking at the price point, under $2,000 for a system with a 5K panel and discrete graphics, and I'm the kind of person who buys a Mac and runs Boot Camp on it so I can run Windows. But, the fact that it has a bit more horsepower under the hood and it's a lot more appealing at the price point, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Matt?
Yeah. I would agree with that. I think the iMac is still one of the probably the strongest system in Apple's computer lineup.
Yeah. So sticking with that one. Well, and you've got your entire there's a lot of articles up about the developers conference, but Matt has a great one up right now on digital trends that you can take a look at and read through. Just kind of some more details about everything that we've been talking about. And there's details on everything that's happened at the developers conference that you can check out right there. And again, this is Close to the Metal. So we do this every week, live Tuesdays, 10 a.m. Pacific time on Facebook and YouTube. And then it goes up as a podcast afterward. So download that, subscribe on iTunes to all of our digital trends podcasts. It's a lot of fun having interaction with you and having live interaction or emailing afterward, podcast@digitaltrends.com, or commenting on the posts and just seeing, whether you agree with some of the things we're saying or what your concerns are. It's always fun to find those things out. And I think that's about it for today.
Yep.
So thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be back next week with another episode.